Let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and joining us for this webcast. My name is Octavie Shakut, and I am your CA Community Manager for CA Spectrum. Before we get started with today's session, I just want to let you know that if you are using the WebEx audio, you should use the Q&A box right in the WebEx to ask any question you have along the way. Please help keeping your line on mute to prevent background noise. So over the phone, we have Amit Mohanty, who is your CA Product Manager for CA Spectrum. We are also joined today by a great team. So Nagesh and Sab, who are going to handle the Q&A. Amit, whenever you are ready, you can take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Octave. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. So my name is Amit. I'm one of the product managers for CA Spectrum. And today I'll take you through the upgrade path for CA Spectrum 10.3. As Octave already mentioned, I have with me Nagesh and Sarab, who will look after the Q&A part. So please feel free to drop in your questions via the chat window. So let's before we begin, quick view of the agenda today. So we'll talk about why upgrade to CA Spectrum 10.3. We'll speak about some upgrade best practices. We'll talk about supported upgrade procedures and recommendations, and then we'll close with a quick view of the upgrade resources that we have available. Before we actually get into the content about upgrades, right? It's important that I take a few minutes to cover the vision and strategy that we have, and for CA Spectrum as well as for our overall NetOps strategy, right? At the end of the day, what matters to any networks or any user of the networks is the experience that they have, right? That's what we're all here for, to provide that exciting, to provide that great digital experience to the user, right? And that's all possible with our CA Spectrum as well as our overall the NetOps vision, right? Which we'll talk about in the next slide. Now, as we talk about the digital experience, how do we sort of bring it before the how do we sort of bring it to the forefront? And that's where the AI ops, the machine learning, the artificial intelligence, the predictive operations piece comes into picture, right? And of course, to wind together the entire story, at the end of the day, we look forward to have automation, which will sort of increase remediation, sort of predict remediation, assist in maintaining the network, have a view of the network before the issues actually occur. So our end goal is providing that digital experience to our customers, and sort of tying that back with our business outcomes, sort of having that deep end-to-end visibility so that we are successful in providing that digital experience. Now, I'll talk about the breadth of our solution here as well. I mean, various independent groups have actually ranked our application solutions, our infrastructure solutions, and our network solutions as #1 in terms of capability, in terms of the depth of the solution that we provide. And that really helps us to provide the end-to-end digital experience that I spoke about in the previous view. Now, in terms of moving towards that digital experience, that's where we have the network operation analytics come into picture, right? Again, the NetOps is not a new product per se. I mean, it's the CAPC where we have the views for fault, we have flow information, we have packet information, and the end goal is again that same providing the holistic network view, in context diagnostics, and being able to relate the relationship and the flexibility. So that's our NetOps architecture. Of course, we have the flow, we have the packet, we're also pushing in the REST and telemetry piece, right? And that's the segue actually into our, the pushing of all the data, be it application data, be it infrastructure metrics, be it, network fault performance logs, into our, digital operational intelligence, machine, right? So what this does is, as we push all the metrics into the unified data lake, and what we also take into account is the business KPI, the end user experience, right? And that's where, the machine learning based anomaly detection and prediction comes into picture, right? And that's our, the operational intelligence view for the CA digital operational intelligence. And I'll talk about this, as we go further into, why upgrade specifically. So again, all this, at the end of the day, I mean, CA Spectrum 10.3, right? And why we should upgrade to 10.3. We'll talk about features and enhancements in this release and the cumulative features and enhancements that are there across the various Spectrum releases, right? We'll also talk about an aspect of having a longer support life cycle, right? Because at the end of the day, if you have a software, that's doing critical network level monitoring, it's all the more important that it continues to be under support, right? And we'll take some time to talk about that. We'll also talk about the platform updates that we have had with 10.3 and how that sort of plays a role into this whole, the need to upgrade CA Spectrum, right? Okay. So let me quickly talk about some key, features and enhancement and what their benefits are, so that those sort of tie back to the need for upgrading CA Spectrum, right? First off, we started off with this CA digital intelligence support, right? So again, it helps the operation team, to have a, to deliver a phenomenal user experience. So note, the user experience is the key here, right? So we're able to improve service quality, drive operational efficiencies. And how is that? I mean, it's basically, we have all the in-context data that can be looked at, that can be analyzed, that can be sort of, with help of our machine learning and AI algos, you could have that, improvement in service quality, drive that operational efficiency, right? That's, the benefit of CA digital operational intelligence support, right? That's ingrained within the CA Spectrum now, right? Again, with 10.3, we also have support for, Dockerization, right? Or support for, OpenShift containers. Benefits being, quite apparent, self-healing on failure, auto-scaling up and down of Spectrum instances, load balancing of one-click servers, and also the time to install is something really important here. I mean, it's for per image could be around 5 to 7 minutes, which really helps in setting up an instance really fast. Again, we have reporting enhancements as well, multi-tenant SRM with Jaspersoft. The unified Jaspersoft really helps in reducing the number of CABI servers where we can accommodate reporting needs of multiple one-click servers. It also eliminates any manual intervention that was required to create multi-tenant reports or tenant-specific reports. Let me move ahead. Again, we also have the Cisco ACI monitoring, representation of the administrative and operational state of the fabric systems. Faults are automatically created, escalated, de-escalated, and deleted by the system as specific conditions are detected, right? Again, we have VMware vSphere monitoring. So with the CA VNA or the Virtual Network Assurance plugin for VMware vSphere, we are able to monitor the VMware vSphere with CS Spectrum. Now this provides a full inventory topology view, from the leaf to the spine to the switches to the virtual machines. Again, if we talk about SD-WAN monitoring, be it Cisco IWAN or Viptela, so this is where the modern networks sort of come in, right? Which is very important, as you move towards that, as your network infrastructure move towards that, that modern, be it SD-WAN or be it virtualization, right? So what it assists is, we are able to understand, the bandwidth, the resource utilization, capacity planning, and be able to monitor and manage the wide area network health and availability. I'll move ahead again. We also have, again, these are all cumulative features which are there and sort of part of 10.3 as well, likely, because that's sort of the cumulative features that we have for CS Spectrum. All the more reason for you to choose to upgrade to the latest version of CS Spectrum. So we have Juniper, SRX, and EX support, right? You're able to monitor each logical system through the main router management, and one-click provides you a view of VLAN, port data. It also have the ability to have a spotlight view of the EX series routers. We talk about Wi-Fi support, Cisco wireless LAN controllers, APs, support for Aruba, right? So you name it. I mean, the CS Spectrum has the ability to monitor that, has the ability to provide you insights into the details of your wireless configuration, your access points, your mobile stations, thresholds, right? Again, you're able to monitor the controller device for traps, events, alarms, and thresholds. We also have third-party service desk integration, which is important because now you're able to have incident creation, submit service desk ticket and launch in context service desk tickets for Spectrum. Again, it includes incident assignment, add, update, name it, close, resolve incident tickets, BMC remedy, service side, HP service manager, and ServiceNow. So what I'm trying to stress here is, if you choose to go with an upgrade for CS Spectrum, you actually get, the entire kind of the key features and enhancements that I talked about, right? And the benefits associated with each of them. Again, some of the cumulative features and enhancements, particularly applicable for customers who might be at a really lower or an unsupported level of CS Spectrum. We'll talk about the support support duration and the life cycle of the support in a little bit. But if we talk about the 64-bit architecture, right? So from 10.0 onwards, we actually moved into the support for 64-bit address space. So that actually added up significant increase in our capacity and scale. So, again, all the more reason for somebody who is at a 10.0, at a sub 10.0 release to upgrade, to a latest release of CS Spectrum. Again, with 10.2, we introduced the huge landscape option, which allowed us to, support more than 1 million models per Spectro server. And this is valid for all releases post 10.2. Again, with regards to integrations, we have, the Spectrum VNA or be it Spectrum UIM integration, but I'm talking about the Spectrum UIM integration specifically here. Again, we have the ability to now, look at, web server logs, capture list of server fails to synchronize between the UIM and Spectrum. So, I mean, the crux of it is, as we look at the cumulative benefits of, Spectrum 10.3, it really provides us a strong case to, start looking at each of these features more carefully and start planning that upgrade for Spectrum 10.3, right? Okay, so I was speaking about the support lifecycle and the role it plays here, right? Again, as on date, Spectrum releases 10 and below are end of service, right? So specifically, if I talk about dates 10.0 and 9.4.4, they have been end of service since December of 2017. Whereas 9.4.3 and below, you could see those have been end of service, for a while now. Like 9.2.x has been end of service since April of 2015, right? So again, so what we have generally available right now is 10.1.x and of course 10.3, which is just recently released, and 10.2.x. Now, we've already announced an end of service for 10.1.x with that date being August of 2019. So all the more reason for you to, start reviewing, the features, the advantages of 10.3 and start planning that upgrade. So it's important that we take a couple of minutes to talk about what is end of service, right? So end of service means that we are no longer providing operational or technical support on a particular software release, and we're also no longer developing any new enhancement, features, or upgrades for that particular software offering. So this is important because if something is end of service or something is scheduled to go end of service, for example, the 10.1.x, which is scheduled to go end of service in August of 2019, it's important that we start, we start doing the planning piece of trying to, determine how best and how soon we can upgrade, right? Because we'll not be providing any operational or technical support, will not be having any new enhancement or features or upgrades, right? So basically, and Spectrum by nature monitors important component of our network, right? So it's all the more reason for us to start planning that upgrade. Now, let me quickly talk about the platform updates that we have with 10.3. So with 10.3 now we have support for Windows Server 2016. So we dropped, there's no longer any support for Solaris. You can also see like Windows 7, 8, 8.1 are no longer supported for the Spectro server or the one-click server. Now, it's important because as we move, as the respective vendors, be it Microsoft or be it Linux, as they move ahead, so CS Spectrum is kind of in locksteps with them. So we sort of move along with that, and as you choose to move into a different platform or a different operating system as a decision within your organization, right? So CS Spectrum is there with you to sort of be, kind of goes through that path. Important to note here that the support for Solaris has been dropped. So when you plan to upgrade, they'll actually be a migration or a fresh install, so to say. So we'll talk about that in one of the next slides. So let's talk about the supported upgrade paths. Now, so this release supports direct upgrades from either 10.2 or any 10.2.x. So doesn't matter you're on 10.2 or 10.2.3 or 10.2.x. You can actually directly upgrade to 10.3. Now I spoke about 10.1.x going end of service in August of 2019. So we recommend that you choose to upgrade from 10.1.x to a supported version, or at least plan to do that, and actually execute that before the actual end of service date. Now, specifically, if you're on a Spectrum release 9.2.x or older, you need to have a two-step, multi-step upgrade. Actually, you need to upgrade to 9.4, and then you need to upgrade finally to 10.2 or 10.3. Right? Now we'll talk about some best practices for our fault-tolerant deployments. Right? Again, all your primary and secondary servers must be upgraded within a small time frame. Now, this release, I think we talked about this one. So this release supports a direct upgrade from 10.2 or higher. Will not repeat that one again. Now, before conducting upgrades, it's important that you have to sort of verify that all components are up to date with the current service packs. It's also important to consult the list of ports and protocols that Spectrum's using, because at times your security parameters may actually require you to temporarily disable these ports and protocols, right? Again, the pattern to follow is you first upgrade the one-click web servers, and then you go for the primary Spectre servers, and then you go for the secondary Spectre servers. Now, this being a fault-tolerant deployment, that's why we have the primary and the secondary Spectre servers. Now, if we talk about upgrade best practices for a non-fault-tolerant deployment, now with no fault-tolerant Spectre servers configured in your deployment, it's recommended that you actually have a temporary fault-tolerant system during the upgrade. So this is important to continue to monitor your network during the upgrade. And so once the temporary system is configured, you disable the primary Spectre server and do an InPlace upgrade. And during this time, as I mentioned, you continue to still monitor your network. Now, important to note, sometimes some of the Spectrum applications do not support an automatic failover, and maybe disabled during the upgrade, right? And that has to be noted and taken care of. Now, if we talk about the upgrade best practices, right? So it's important that you preserve the customized support files. Now, it may, I mean, some of the custom support files, may be overwritten. So when you're installing a new version of CS Spectrum, And so it's important that you preserve this, right? And you can actually move these, event files that provided the details of where they exist. And so before you upgrade the one-click servers, you can actually move these files to the spec root, custom events, CSEV format folder, right? And it's important that you not copy the XML file to another computer, because when you migrate and upgrade CS Spectrum, these files actually contain memory settings that may not be compatible with the computers where you're trying to copy the custom directory. Now, let's talk about the upgrade procedures as such. I mean, we can have an in-place upgrade. Now, what is an in-place upgrade? An in-place upgrade actually installs a new version of Spectrum or an earlier version in the same system and directory, and you don't require a database migration. Now, the steps that I'm talking about here, so as we'll talk about the upgrade resources, so these are the steps that are included in our documentation specifically about the in-place upgrades. So if we have a listing of pre-upgrade tasks, we have how do we go about preserving the existing Spectrum server database, how do we go about preserving the events and the statistics database, and then finally, how do we install CS Spectrum. I'll not go into, sort of step by step into each of these, what needs to happen in each of these steps, but these are actually clearly articulated in our upgrade resources, specifically in the documentation, and we have links to the same at the end of the presentation. Now, the other upgrade procedure we could have is migration or a fresh install. Now, again, so these details, how do we migrate and upgrade on a Windows platform? How do we migrate and upgrade on a Linux platform? And what are our typical post-migration tasks? Again, we have articulated these in detail in our documentation for upgrades. And I'll not go into each and every step that is required to perform a migration and upgrade on a Windows platform or on a Linux platform. But this is important because we dropped support for Solaris from 10.3, right? So, migration and fresh or a fresh install would be, required on those cases. Now, again, if I talk about what should you follow, it actually depends on your network, and you are sort of the best judge of what sort of upgrade is required for your Spectrum deployment. Now, if we talk about an in-place upgrade, as we mentioned earlier, it installs a new version of Spectrum on an earlier version in the same system. And whereas if we talk about a migration or a fresh install, that's typically when you change the server platform and require data migration. And of course, we talked about in the cumulative features and enhancements about the 64-bit architecture and the huge landscape options. So if your current deployment is on a lower release of Spectrum, which is perhaps still at 32-bit, and you want to plan for a upgrade to a 64-bit architecture, that's where you need a migration or a fresh install. On the same lines, if you're still using the legacy landscape option and want to take advantage of the huge landscape option, which actually helps you manage more than 1 million instances, right? So in that case also, a migration or a fresh install is the way to go. So in terms of the resources that are available for us, I mean, so we have an installing and upgrading Spectrum 10.3 section within our documentation, which actually articulates each and every steps. And we talk about specifically upgrading from earlier versions, specifically if you are sitting on a 9.2 kind of release. I'd also like to recommend that you go over the support policy and terms, particularly because all Spectrum releases, starting from 10.0 and below, are all end of service, right? So all the more important reason for you to plan that upgrade. And finally, I'd like to recommend you to attend a roadmap session. The roadmap session would actually give you a view of where we are headed. Kind of how does Spectrum fit into the entire NetOps view and how we integrate into the operational intelligence platform. I briefly touched about that, but attending a roadmap session would be actually really helpful to get that overall idea, and that sort of helps you plan your network ahead as well. As we go about this journey of moving CS Spectrum within your network from a older release to the latest release. Now the next steps, as I mentioned multiple times during this lesson, so please review the features available in CS Spectrum 10.3. Again, I talked about some of the key features, but we have an exhaustive list of features, and in the documentation, you could actually do a feature comparison option, and that actually gives you a very good view of how CS Spectrum has progressed from, be it 9.2 or, as we have moved in the journey as we are standing at 10.3. And, please plan to upgrade your CS Spectrum 10.3 as soon as, as early as possible, and especially keep in mind the dates for the end of service for 10.1.x, right? Because that's important. I mean, may so happen that the CS Spectrum may be end of service, right? And finally, please consider engaging CS services or a services partner for expertise to reduce effort. Of course, I mean, we're also available to conduct a more detailed session on specific areas that you may require. So please feel to provide that feedback to us. That's all I had for today.
Thank you so much, Emmett. Thank you for your great presentation. So if you have any question, please feel free to write them in the Q&A. Sab and Nagesh have already answered each question in the Q&A right now. But feel free, if you have more questions, we have 25 minutes left. And if you want to ask any live question, you can unmute your line by pressing #6. So #6 if you want to ask any live question. I can't see any new question. So it looks like it is time for us to wrap things up. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Nagesh. Thank you, Saf.
Thank you.
For joining this webcast today. And thank you to all our attendees. So as usual, the discussion can continue over the communities. So feel free if you have any question. We are going to post the replay of this webcast as as well as the webcast material. So feel free to continue the conversation on the community. Looks like we have a question. Let me check quickly. Yeah, we have a new question. 10.1.1 requires upgrade to 10.2 before 10.3.
Amit, I'm audible?
Yeah, you're
Can you
audible.
please, Amit, can you please share your screen where you have listed down the upgrade paths? I think that will be useful in this case.
Yeah.
Can you please make it? Yeah. Okay, Glenn, if you see here, right, if you are on 10.1.x, you first have to upgrade. You can directly upgrade to 10.2. Right, so there is no direct path to 10.3 at this point of time. Yep. So if you, as per your question, you need to first upgrade to 10.2, which is a direct upgrade, and then post that you can upgrade to 10.3. Okay, I think I'll answer that. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Tab. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation. And so we are going to continue the discussion on the community. So feel free to ask any question you may have. I wish you all a great day. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thank you.